I'm excited to be here. When Goethe-Institut reached out and asked me to moderate, I said absolutely, because I'm not as educated about NFTs as I'd like to be. So I just saw this as a learning opportunity for myself. I've always been curious, but sometimes you get too busy doing and building to take time out and engage with learning. So this for me was both a way to sort of learn from these wonderful panelists. So I'm doing less of moderation. I'm more like going to be like you, trying to connect the dots and ask more questions. So feel free to come to my side, or rather I'll come to your side in this, this event. So to introduce, I know that all of you know broadly what we are talking about, but this conversation also happened partly, or rather the structure of this conversation was partly set because of Goethe-Institut's larger focus around NFTs as a project. I think there was a session in Delhi that looked at communities and NFTs, and this session specifically looks at legal frameworks and access around NFTs. So that is what we'll be focusing on, and not surprisingly, you have lawyers on the panel. So you have Anuradha Chowdhary, who is the founder of 0 to 3, 1-year-old company, so a very young company, but doing some good work in the Web3 space. And then you've got, I'm going with my list of alphabetical order. There's Shakti, who's an NFT artist. I think most of you know her. Mumbai-based photographer and well-known glitch artist. And I got to know that day, but I couldn't gather from our conversation and reconfirm today that she's founded a new platform, LensPost, which is now going to be named Remix, which is a place for remixing your NFTs. And there is Pankhuri Upadhyay, who is the lawyer. I mean, she's obviously a lawyer and a founder of Makers Legal and a particle physics geek.
Wow, you deep dive.
I did a little more research. Yes. So I was like, what is it I can share about them that goes beyond what they do? But yeah, so what you have are practitioners and experts in law. So dig into those minefields and get what you can to ask. What we wanted to do to begin with was start with some very basic questions around what is an NFT. And I'm sure you would have done a ton of research around it and read about it. What we had asked our panel to do is let's talk about these terms, but through an example. So let's talk about what NFT is, but explain to me as if I'm an artist and I'm trying to understand NFT. So maybe starting with you, sorry, Anuradha.
So, hi everyone. Before we get into what an NFT is, and we were discussing this earlier as well. Sorry, is this on?
Yeah.
Before we get into what an NFT is, I think it's important to understand the difference between fungibility and non-fungibility. So something that is fungible is something that can easily be replaced, right? You can replace a 100 rupee note with another 100 rupee note, or well, 2000 rupee notes, not so much anymore. But something that's non-fungible is something that is unique and it cannot easily be replaced. So for example, M.F. Hussein's famous painting, Mother Teresa, cannot be replaced with a Raza painting. In fact, it can't even be replaced with another M.F. Hussain painting. So that's what happens when you're looking at NFTs. NFTs are non-fungible tokens. They're unique digital tokens that basically live on the blockchain. They help prove ownership. They help verify the authenticity of the underlying asset. And they have a bunch of other functions that we'll get into soon.
Thank you. Taking that to Shakti, now that we've sort of understood what an NFT is, how does it help an artist?
NFTs are actually a playground wherein I would say third parties are eliminated. In the sense, there is no gatekeeping in terms of how you show your art. It opens up a lot of access for artists to sort of reach out to a global audience and have a brand for yourself. And also NFTs sort of open up a place wherein your IP is actually in your control. You control your data and you own all information which usually is not made available to you. For example, if you make a sale via a gallery, you do not know the journey of that artwork going forward. But on blockchain, you have complete transparency.
Okay, let's break that down. You said the first thing you said was that it's a market. It's a system which does not bring in third-party players, right?
Yeah.
Who in the traditional market, I would imagine this third-party players would be your gallery, would be the entire exhibition ecosystem.
Yes.
So what you're saying essentially is here, it's a D2C almost, directly to the customer, and you are able to reach the customer directly.
Yes.
The second thing that you spoke about is, as an artist, that then you don't have the marketplace model. A gallery model or a traditional art market model will be art fairs, galleries, maybe some online sales. So an online marketplace already exists. How does NFT within that context help artists, like getting away from the market? If you can just talk through from that perspective, like show us.
All right. So I'll give you my own example,
Yes.
a living example. I was a corporate employee, and predominantly I was practicing digital art because obviously corporate life doesn't give you the luxury of, making physical art so much. And all these years, sort of, I kept approaching galleries, I kept approaching, art fests, but obviously, A, digital artists, B, self-taught. That didn't amount to much. While I knew my art and aesthetic is different, and it definitely deserves an audience. And after hearing all these no's everywhere, I started early in NFTs, which sort of established my brand as an artist, and I was selling directly to global audiences, and I didn't need permission.
Got it.
From a third party.
So there is a system that's set up that creates barriers to access, and
Yes.
that barrier, education or qualification, can also be a barrier to access. Now,
Yes.
some people might say that you need qualification. Why would I have an amateur build a plane? So how would you argue for that in the context of how does the marketplace help you even bring your credibility forward, which traditionally in the traditional market lies with education or training, for the want of a better word.
So essentially here, I think establishing your brand and telling your story opens up avenues, because see, NFTs, have also gone through like a lot of evolution, because when NFTs started out, they were not meant for trading art. Essentially, it was just crypto degens trading meme coins, trading fungible tokens. Suddenly, they got creative and they started trading Pepe memes. And those are the first kind of, NFTs known. And then eventually, they opened up to artists where, artists who are geeks and computer nerds, they started putting out like, generative art or code-based art, right? And that's when slowly you had all your analog artists sort of also, coming and discovering that, hey, maybe they can tokenize their physical works as well, right? So when I started out, obviously NFTs was very new, and the circuit was pretty underground, right? And the good part is that I was always an artist. I was always a glitch artist. Since 2014, I've been in the glitch artist community, and it is through that community that I got access to NFTs, because I knew people who were already sort of, placed well in the NFT ecosystem, and credibility came because I was already in the circuit. They knew that I'm an artist who's been making art since 2015. So I did have sort of people vouch for my work, and I networked with the right people, and that sort of...
So it creates access, gives you a certain amount of credibility despite the background that you come in.
Yes.
And it allows you to sort of meet different marketplaces that are also emerging alongside your work.
Yes.
There's one more thing that you mentioned, but I'll move to Pankhuri for that. You spoke about the fact that you don't know what happens to your work after an artwork is sold, which brings us to the word blockchain. So Pankhuri, if you can talk us through again, breaking the jargon down to what is blockchain. You can use this actually.
Okay,
might be
sure. Yeah. I think you guys must have got a bit of a primer today during the day about the technology, but so I don't want to get into the the technical aspect of it so much, but from an artistic perspective, I think the key things to remember about the technology is that because of its inherent structure, the inherent architecture, the things that it simplifies for artists are some of the things that Shakti kind of spoke about, which is that it makes transparency one of the very important aspects of the whole process, which was problematic in our existing infrastructures. And even things like, if I have to give an example of its application in a non-art world sense, also a problem that, you know, we face in our daily lives with real estate, you know, title diligence and stuff like that, and even provenance for artworks, for example. It's been very hard to maintain those databases. A lot of issues have come globally because of such issues. Blockchain as a technology really fixes that very easily. And yeah, I think that's very, without getting into the technical aspects of what blockchain technology actually is, these are the benefits from an artistic perspective to keep in mind. And also the fact that, you know, the metadata cannot be altered with, it cannot be tampered with. There is an inherent trust in the system as well, you know, confidence with which, you know, while a lot of this transparency bit is maybe not so existent with the platforms that you're working with some of the middlemen, not in the traditional sense, but there are new middlemen now, I would say. But still, you know, we're still seeing a place where the technology is still winning. Recently there was a court case in the US about, I think, what was supposed to be the first NFT ever minted, Kevin McCoy's Quantum. I think there was this dispute, and the whole thing kind of came down to proving, you know, the difference between an NFT he had minted at an earlier marketplace versus Ethereum, I think. And blockchain technology was what kind of helped prove, you know, where the ownership lied, and really helped resolve. So basically, blockchain really came out winning in that dispute. Yeah. Does that kind of answer it?
Yeah, that does. Yeah. So the reason for, I know that several people here, several of you present here, I think most of you were in the workshop earlier, so some of this might seem repetitive, but the idea was to get away from the jargon and understand which parts of these definitions, these terminologies impact you in a very practical sense. So what I'm hearing from the three of you, just to sort of draw this out and then take us to the next part, is one, it's a different, market as opposed to the traditional market. And what differentiates this market is control in the hands of the community or the artist, authenticity and transparency, and being able to trace the provenance. So it sort of solves for Shumta's creative destruction theory. If you look at that, it creatively destructs the world for a better world. Now, the better is arguable. We'll come to that later. But the point is that it sort of looks at, not for the sake of destruction, but looking at the traditional model of, hey, there's no access, hey, you need education, hey, you need a history, you need to be kissing the right bums. Am I allowed to say? To be able to, I just realized that I should be somewhat PC here. But in order to make it in a market which is anyways so ambiguous, it's anyways driven by, to a certain extent, black money, and it has many more non-controllable factors affecting it. So the NFT, blockchain, Web3 universe sort of adds to that dialogue, helping to resolve some of these challenges which sort of stagnate the market for newer entrants. Not necessarily, it does still function, it's still growing, but maybe not in a way that involves many more players in the market. Just to close this loop with Web3, like this entire universe, we were earlier talking about difference between Web 2 and Web 3. What is Web 3? What does it have, and why is it that we're so obsessed with 1.2, 2.0, 3.0?
So that's actually a pretty difficult question to answer. Web 3 is a lot of things, but the core of Web 3 is decentralization and control, like Shakti said. It's control over your data, it's control about how that data is used. And it's the fact that you want to remove a central authority, right? So a good example of Web3 is a transfer of cryptocurrency. If you're looking at one Bitcoin is maybe not enough, but maybe if you're looking at 5 Bitcoin being transferred from me to you, there is no central authority when it comes to that transfer, and that's exactly what Web3 is trying to achieve, the removal of centralization.
Okay. That's an excellent segue into the larger aspect of this conversation, is regulation. When you're talking about a new market, a new system, how can you, there's a free-for-all, the democratic Wikipedia structure, or in the case that we are seeing right now, governments are trying to come in and trying to regulate. So you still need to, no matter how utopian it might seem, it still needs to operate in the existing ecosystem, however flawed that might be. So given this, Pankhuri, my question is to you is, what are the legal frameworks regulating NFTs and I would mainly NFTs, globally first and then in India?
Yeah. Yeah, also just adding to, what Web3 kind of, I think, exists as right now is also, I think, a very, very philosophical based solutions to existing frameworks. I think that's also one good way to look at how it's kind of developing. It's offering alternative solutions to our existing frameworks, including the, finance system as we know it currently. In terms of regulation, since the space is quite developing, especially since the really tumultuous years that have passed in the space of cryptocurrencies in the last, I think since 2022, there's now a bit of an urgency to kind of quickly regulate these spaces. And for example, in the EU has recently passed, MiCA, which is basically a legislation to do with crypto assets. But like it was expected, they've actually excluded NFTs as a asset definition from that whole regulation, and they plan to, I think, release a report in a couple of months. And I think that's a trend that we're seeing globally also, which is that, people are kind of now taking comments, like the US Copyright Office is in the process of similarly, speaking with industry players and the public at large to kind of take a step back and really find appropriate ways to regulate this. I think in India, I have to talk a bit about cryptocurrencies in terms of regulation when I talk about NFTs, because I'm not sure if we're going to see, like, as a concept, it will be governed by multiple legislations and there won't be just one law about NFTs. But in India, just about cryptocurrencies, I think the attitude initially of the government was, I think it went from being dismissive to, kind of apprehensive, and now I think they're kind of accepting and planning to regulate the whole space. For example, RBI initially, I think, issued a circular where they banned cryptocurrencies, which then the Supreme Court lifted that ban, and after which they've kind of said that, okay, fine, why don't companies, at least start gathering the data, and, they've put some disclosure mechanisms in place. But I think in terms of legislation, the first sort of concrete thing we've seen is that in the last finance bill, basically they gave a definition of virtual digital assets, which included cryptocurrencies and also NFTs. And basically from a taxation perspective, because I mean that's one of the first things they have to do is kind of impose taxes, and also to help track these transactions. So I think we'll talk about the taxation bit a little later, but in India, that's been kind of the approach. I'm not sure if I'm missing something, but I think a lot of this also gets reflected in terms of the lawsuits that have been happening around NFTs, where the regulations are at. And let me know if you need me to get a little deeper into the kind of lawsuits, because they involve, that kind of shows the sort of unregulated aspects of it also. So we have a lot of copyright-related lawsuits that are kind of ongoing, let's we can come back to that.
Point of view of law. So what I'm hearing from you is essentially that cryptocurrencies are somewhat regulated globally. There are some places where there are laws. NFT is just following, like it's very, very nascent in terms of regulation.
Connected, so you have to, because the whole thing kind of happens using. Okay, so there is a way to buy an NFT using fiat currency, which is our existing, the rupees and the dollars. But I think a majority of the transactions for NFTs happen through cryptocurrencies. And so also NFTs have kind of also become an avenue for a lot of financial crimes like we're seeing. And NFTs was, cryptocurrencies were kind of seeing that, and NFTs became one of the avenues to kind of facilitate that. And so there has been, money laundering sort of, yeah. All
like, otherwise, we'll get like totally. No, but what I'm trying to get to is that while you're absolutely right in saying that cryptocurrencies is used to transact NFTs, but there are several things under NFTs, as we've just spoken about, in terms of provenance, authenticity, copyright, which are not necessarily transaction related. So that's where you're saying that NFTs is not necessarily regulated from the point of view of, aside from transactions, which is where cryptocurrency comes in, I learned well earlier today, but we had a big conversation around crypto, using the word crypto in today's conversation in relation to NFTs in a different way. But what I'm hearing from you is there is that regulatory framework which is still underway, and in India there is nothing. There was a ban that was lifted, and there is a contemplation of setting up guidelines that would then regulate, to a certain extent, cryptocurrency transactions in India. And NFTs, and Lakshmi coin, I remembered now. That is, well, the proposal is to introduce its own digital currency called Lakshmi coin. So this is broadly where it's at.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Just kind of laugh about it. That's just the name, that's it.
Lakshmi coin. But I think moving from there, so essentially it's still in the process of being developed. But transactions are still happening. Shakti is already doing work. You're still, dealing in transactions, you're dealing in exchange, you're dealing in putting your work out there and hoping no one steals it, which the framework allows, but then how does the law recognize it? Yeah. So in our earlier conversations, we were talking about there are existing laws, which are then used to regulate some of these conversations. So let's talk through some of those laws and see where NFTs fits in. Shall we start with the Copyright Act? Whoever wants to go.
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I can. So, yeah, I think since these transactions are happening, I think the effort has been to kind of adapt existing laws to, different aspects of an NFT. And I mean, since a lot of the use of NFT is around creative uses involving artistic works, a big aspect is copyright and other intellectual property laws. So, to give you, again, I think I can speak a bit about some of the lawsuits that have happened here and then come back to what it'll help.
Because
yeah.
I think more
okay, sure.
Let's try
just which aspects of the Copyright Act.
Point of
yeah.
view. So, Copyright Act, Shakti has made an artwork.
Yeah.
What rights does she have towards that artwork under the Copyright Act, Indian Copyright Act?
Okay. So the minute, the way the Copyright Act in India and in a couple of other jurisdictions works is that, the minute you create an artwork, you get copyright in it. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to do anything extra for it. There is a provision for registering it, which adds a level of security. But so if I make a sketch, if it has, if it meets certain requirements such as originality, there is enough creative expression, it's in a tangible format, you have copyright in that work. Now, an NFT is a version of that artwork. It's basically a reproduction of that work. So copyright also comes with a bunch of rights, which means that if I've made an artwork, only I have the right to reproduce it, only I have the right to issue it and publish it in different formats. And NFT is one of those rights in extension of your existing copyright in your work. And I think, so let's say, for example, if she's put it on an NFT marketplace, I think the first consideration to have there is also obviously the terms of use of the marketplace itself. But from a copyright perspective, there are different ways in which you can let go, basically monetize the work, which is the kind of the concept of copyright. So if I sell my NFT, if there's a person who's acquiring it, I still retain the copyright in that. That's one of the models in which, this works, which means that I can also create other works from that existing work. I have the right. Whereas that one, NFT, that one particular copy will be owned by the person who's buying it. And also this depends on the kind of licenses I'm giving through my NFT. We have seen that some people assign complete copyright in a particular artwork to the buyer, but that's also a little problematic because actually in India that assignment needs to be compulsorily accompanied with a written contract.
Okay, so that's an important point.
Yeah,
is the fact that it needs to be accompanied with a written contract. Just doing a digital transaction in this context is not enough to protect you.
And yeah, I mean, it has to be a written contract. It has to be very specific in terms of, how long that assignment is supposed to be. And also, in fact, this is, I think, very overlooked, not just in the NFT space, but generally in the media and entertainment industry, that assignment of copyright also implicates stamp duty. Especially in, I think there's only an exemption in Delhi. In Bombay, there is stamp duty on assignment of copyright. So while I don't think most a majority of use cases of NFTs assign copyright, but if you plan to, just remember that. But traditionally, I think how it would work is that, you know, I give some of the rights to that buyer. So now that buyer, what they can do is basically, I think, display that copy, for example, for personal use. They cannot go ahead and make different works from that NFT, unless specifically, you know, part of that, the license. So when you buy an NFT, it's kind of like buying one copy of a book, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, you have that copy, but you cannot make other versions of that book. You can't basically mess with the inherent underlying copyright, which the artist still has.
Right. So from the artist's point, if Anuradha, if you can talk to, like you are advising a client who's bought an artwork, what do they what is it that they can and cannot do, and what is it that they should be mindful of to safeguard their purchase as a buyer in this context of NFTs?
Okay, so one of the main things to understand here, as Pankhuri was also explaining, is the concept of ownership versus copyright, right? Now, if I am purchasing an NFT of Shakti's artwork, it does not actually mean that intellectual property rights in that artwork will automatically get transferred to me. That's not what happens. I can purchase an NFT of the Mona Lisa, but I will only have the right to display that painting. If it's a Mona Lisa, obviously I'll have the right to show it off as well. But I'll not have the right to, you know, take a photograph of the Mona Lisa, print it on a T-shirt, and sell that T-shirt. I won't have the right to license, give a license to a film producer to put that artwork in his or her film. So that's a very important concept to understand. Let me try to give you another example with this from the fashion industry. Maybe that should make it a bit more interesting. I hope you guys aren't falling asleep here with our technical discussions. But Gucci has created Gucci Town. Okay, it's a virtual town. It exists on Roblox, which is a metaverse platform. One can go to Gucci Town. You can play games. You can purchase a Gucci handbag as an NFT. You can even, I think, you can even interact with Miley Cyrus. I don't know how many of us would be interested in that, but yes, you can do these sorts of things, right? Now, if I buy a Gucci Diana handbag NFT, I think that's a very popular Gucci bag. But if I buy an NFT of the Gucci Diana handbag, it doesn't mean that I own the physical Diana handbag. I just own an NFT of it. It doesn't mean that I have the rights to reproduce copies of that handbag. It only means that I have the rights to the NFT. My avatar can probably wear that Gucci handbag in the metaverse. But I don't have the rights to the original handbag. Now, there are brands that are doing this. These are called phygital NFTs, where they are transferring ownership of the underlying asset, the physical asset itself, with the NFT. So Dolce & Gabbana did a couple of luxury auctions where the NFTs came attached with the right to, with access to exclusive Dolce & Gabbana events. There are jewelry brands that are selling their jewelry, which is NFTs, and the NFT is attached to the physical jewelry itself. And this can be done. Now, when I go into a Gucci store, a physical Gucci store, and I purchase a physical Gucci bag, not an NFT, does that give me the right to mint an NFT of it? No, of course it doesn't, because I've bought the handbag, I can use the handbag. I can't just suddenly start taking Gucci's logo and, you know, making copies of the bag and selling those bags. Similarly, I can't mint an NFT of that bag because that right hasn't been given to me. It does not automatically come to me, but like I said, it can be licensed away. So as an NFT creator, you can decide what rights you want to part with. Do you want your NFT to have utility? You know, if I purchase an NFT of Shakti's artwork, maybe that NFT will give me exclusive access to something else. You know, maybe Shakti's collaborated with you and you guys have set up an event, or you guys have set up a workshop. We recently, so 023 is a part of Web3 Lex. It's an international network of lawyers and law firms in Web3. And recently we had an event in Spatial, and which was basically a token gated event where you could purchase NFTs of Web3 Lex, which would give you access to an open round session. Actually, for that, you didn't really need the NFT. You could just come. But the NFT would give you access to a private consultation session with well, one of the sessions was with me on artificial intelligence law. But these are the sorts of things that can be done. Now, as a purchaser of an NFT, you need to be very, very mindful of what rights come with those NFTs. You can't just, you know, assume that you have all the rights under the sun. You need to be careful, because then you're infringing copyright and you're infringing rights, and that does attract penal provisions of the law.
So that's where the contracts come in, and you referred to that, right? In India, you have to register a physical contract, just you know,
not register necessarily, but it has to
have a
be in
physical
writing,
contract.
and stamp duty implications exist for copyright assignment.
So
Yeah.
then that's the intersection with the the Contracts Act. That we
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
So under that act, what do you need to bear in mind, both as, and I'm just put you on opposite sides of like a artist and a buyer, basically. So
Okay.
as an artist, how can I be compliant under the Contracts Act?
I mean, Contract Act is basically, the basic premise of it is that if I am, you know, entering into a transaction with any person, the whole point is that, you know, there are some obligations and there's a basic understanding at play, and for it to actually become a valid legal contract, there are some terms that it has to meet. And I think that will be applied to anything that we do, and that obviously includes NFTs. So, for example, if I'm an artist and I plan to use a particular platform to upload my works, I have a contract with that platform, which is basically possibly, you know, when I register with them, their terms of service, their terms of use, all of those terms and conditions apply to me, and that is the contract that we have. That, you know, that would basically mean that, you know, I will comply with some obligations, such as maybe I'll only mint ethically correct, or, you know, I won't be uploading copyright infringing copies. So I am also sort of agreeing to certain terms and conditions of my use of that platform. In exchange, they are providing a service, and they're saying that, you know, as part of our contract, as part of our agreement, maybe this will be the payment terms, this is going to be our fee. So that is kind of where contract would come in. And then secondly, when I am selling my work to a buyer, it's basically a similar setup. Like, I'm selling you a product, what am I giving you with it? What rights do you have, like she said. So, you know, all of those terms and conditions of what you can do with that work, where my ownership lies of copyright, that is what makes the contract between us. So I think.
And from a buyer point of view, in this case, it's about.
It's about the same terms and conditions.
The same terms and conditions.
Yes, we are in Web3 right now, and you know, a lot of artists sort of worked with platforms for a bit, and then we realized that platforms also come with issues of gatekeeping, taking away high chunks of commission. Platforms have also refused on-chain royalties, which sort of make NFTs appealing. So a lot of artists are now practicing deploying their own smart contracts. In the sense, a smart contract is obviously in all functionalities, it is like the papers that we go and we get stamps on, but here it is deployed by a code, right? So I actually sell my NFTs now on my own code, wherein I have like a drop-down menu, very simple. It'll let me pick what kind of provenance I want to give. So if I want to give away some rights, if I want to give away commercial rights, or if I want to give away my artwork as CC0, that is free, permissionless, anybody can come and use it, right? So you need to understand what kind of buyers are actually attracted to your work and deploy that on your own smart contract, and it is as simple as that now.
Okay, great.
Yeah, can I just also add about smart contracts? I think it's a version of contracts which are basically self-executing. They get executed based on the blockchain technology, and how they're programmed is, I think a good way to look at it is like basically they use an if then or else logic. So there are certain preconditions you kind of program into it, saying that, you know, if this happens, then you know, this action will occur automatically. And there are problems with it in terms of, like, you know, changing the terms and conditions at a later point, but it's also helpful that, you know, it's a very clear self-executing process. So yeah.
Just want to, you know, I'm just picking up from both your points and slightly moving away from the framework. You're talking about a smart contract, and you're talking about how good it is. We also spoke about marketplaces, and to a certain extent replication of exploitation that can also happen with this. What do you need to keep in mind when you're working with these platforms and with the smart contract? And if there is a problem that you encounter, what is your recourse in law to solve for that?
As an artist, see, as an artist, if you are working with these platforms, there are a couple of things that you need to keep in mind to protect yourself, right? There's, of course, a lot of technical complexities with NFTs and understanding the space, but the legal concerns are not far behind, right? So for artists, the first rule of thumb when you're minting an NFT is to ensure that the work is original, unique, and that it belongs to you. You cannot mint an NFT of an artwork that belongs to someone else. That would be copyright infringement, right? The second thing to consider is that, was that work created in collaboration with anyone? Is that a collaborative work? Does that work incorporate an other artist's work in it? If it does, then, I mean, in all senses of practicality, you'd need permission from that person to, you know, mint an NFT of that. Is it licensed work, right? You may be the owner of copyright in that work. The intellectual property rights may belong to you, but you may have licensed that away. So ideally get a lawyer to look at the contracts and see if you've retained the right to mint the NFT, right? And another thing to consider, of course, is your compliances under law. You have, well, India does not actually not have any laws when it comes to Web3. We have some advertising guidelines. We have anti-money laundering laws, we have taxation laws. So you need to ensure compliance with these laws, understand how they apply to you, what thresholds they may apply in, and then of course try to comply with them. And the most important thing is that, you know, it's like you're doing this very directly, you're sort of you know, executing your own smart contract and doing all of that. But a lot of artists go to third parties and they go to these agencies because they don't want to get into the technical complexities of it, right? So they'll go to an agency, and there are tons out there that mint NFTs for them, and then they market these NFTs and promote these NFTs. So you need to ensure that every step of the way you're entering into some kind of contract where that contract has clear dispute resolution mechanisms, it has clear termination mechanisms, it has very distinct clauses on ownership of the intellectual property rights, and you sort of understand what rights you're parting with and what rights you're not. So these are some of the things that artists should be considering when safeguarding themselves. Now, sorry, do you want to add something?
No, I think what I was saying was that, also just to add to that, is what happens when an issue occurs. You've done all of these.
Yeah.
Shakti is awesome. She knows her smart contract.
Yeah.
But she's dealing with an issue. Shakti, could you give an example of an issue that you might potentially deal with?
Like when you sign up for a platform, they have a clear jurisdiction mentioned, because those jurisdictions, because those marketplaces also registered somewhere.
Yes.
They have some legal existence. They don't exist just on chain, right? So then you need to figure out that jurisdiction and then sort of take a recourse accordingly.
So you can't obviously look for dispute resolution within the country. You'll have to look at the jurisdiction of that country where the company is registered. So my question is that in case an issue occurs, what is it that the artist needs to do?
Okay,
Someone's
so the first thing...
sold their artwork as a t-shirt somewhere, as an example.
So the first thing would be to, of course, contact the marketplace. Try to have a conversation with them if they are amenable to it. If you've not done your due diligence and, you know, you've, for instance, not received a portion of a royalty that is due to you, there are marketplaces that don't have royalties, and that's a major red flag. That's one of the issues that happens. But like Pankhuri was saying, you have to be very, very careful about the terms and conditions and policies of these marketplaces, because that will give you a dispute resolution mechanism if the marketplace has one. That will help you understand the way in which royalties flow. Now, if that still doesn't work, then you need to contact a lawyer. The lawyer will probably help you through it, maybe sending legal notices. If the jurisdiction is not India, then, you know, you may have to get someone local there to help you out. But realistically speaking, the thing with offshore marketplaces is that it's very difficult for India to have extraterritorial jurisdiction, but certain provisions of the IT Act could help you, because if there is a marketplace that is outside of India but it has users in India or it has residents in India doing transactions, then the marketplace would need to comply with Indian laws. And while there's not much that we can do sitting from India, what the authorities can do is block access to that marketplace. So they still suffer sort of revenue loss, right? Because Indian user base is huge.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Great.
if anyone wants to add.
Yeah. So what comes under education of Web3 is the basic simple fact that Web3 is meant for complete ownership. And the fact that people still go to platforms, give away the original files which are on-chain minted by a third party and not you, right? So in that case, you have to ensure that the smart contract has a revenue split with you. Don't wait for it to be an off-chain revenue split.
Okay.
So make sure
Can you break it down from Latin
Okay.
for everyone?
Okay. So I have an artwork, okay, which I am giving away to Gallery XYZ, okay, and Gallery XYZ says that we will make it an NFT and we will sell it on your behalf. Okay. Maybe they have a bigger brand name, they will be able to attract more buyers, okay. But this is where people are going wrong. The fact that your work is going to be on NFT, you need to have an on-chain track record, or at least the smart contract that these guys are minting the NFT on should have your address for a revenue split.
Yeah, okay. So, Pankhuri, you just to talk through it from a client perspective, like in this case, I mean, I'm sure you're dealing with a lot of people who have this kind of a dispute. You're dealing with third parties who are doing the work for you because, you might be scared, you don't know, you don't have the time, you don't care. Several reasons. So when this happens, when they don't have the necessary knowledge or the motivation to learn making a smart contract, how is it that they can protect themselves within this context?
You mean as an artist trying to do...
or also as a company.
Yeah. I think it again just comes down to, basic good practices such as anyone that you're dealing with, especially, if it involves imparting any kind of rights to your work, whether it is that they will sell on your behalf, they'll mint on your behalf, there has to be a written contract to explain exactly how that will flow, exactly what that person's obligations will be towards you. It could include mechanisms like, they have to, report to you, make, basically share everything that they're doing with it on a quarterly basis, come back to you with all the revenues that they're if they're receiving revenues on your behalf, and other many such compliances. And like she said, I think giving away, a sort of power of attorney to someone to do all of this on your behalf is always tricky. So the idea is to use somebody else's services smartly, where provisions are put in place that automatically the revenues can come to you. You're not dependent or at their mercy if they default. Yeah. So I mean, this is a good way to kind of look at this. But also, if you're making NFTs, I think I also want to talk a bit about, I think she mentioned a bit about if there are other people involved in the process, and I think we have a lot of filmmakers in the audience as well. Basically, how do you even identify what work can be, is qualified to be an NFT? You may have been, for example, part of a film project and may have contributed as a writer, you may have contributed as an actor, and I think we're basically right now in the middle of advising a lot of production houses and a lot of actors and people invested in the film industry about who actually can mint that particular NFT in a film. And I think there was a lawsuit in the US about related to Pulp Fiction. I think Quentin Tarantino thought that he had the rights, being the creator, writer, director of that film. He thought that he had the rights to kind of release, I think, mint basically NFTs of unreleased footage from Pulp Fiction, and he went out there and did that, and immediately Miramax, the production house, was the distributor in this case, was like, you do not have the rights, we have the rights to do anything with that film, which included even unreleased footage, which was not part of the film. So even, again, I think I can't stress the importance of contracts at every step of the way, like she said as well, enough. And now all of these existing provisions, these templates have to be updated. We are doing it for our clients where it's not left vague as to which rights I'm giving away. NFTs are very much specifically spoken about while the deal is happening. So, for example, for an actor, usually these contracts, what they say is that, we will have the rights to your likeness, your attributes, and, whatever your performance is in the film, we can do whatever we want with it, which is kind of fair because, as a producer, as a director, you want that freedom to be able to use their performance. But even then, we used to kind of earlier restrict it that, you can't use this performance for an endorsement. You can't use, this actor's, you can't do whatever you want with it. You have to use it for the film. But now we are specifically also carving out that, if you ever plan to make NFTs, depending on the actor, we're negotiating terms with them of maybe possibly, revenue shares, or they will take permission from the actor to approve what kind of an NFT is being shared, etc. So this is one example, and even as a writer, just be mindful of any work that you're doing which has potential to become an NFT, maybe negotiate it at a contract level already.
Yeah. So just to, because it's been a slightly longish conversation on legal frameworks, and I think it can get brain foggy at some point. What we've done is we've tried to look at existing laws that anyways you're working with, and where does NFT fit into that? And from just to sort of little bit of a recap in terms of what you're saying, number one is understand your relationship with the artwork. Are you the full owner? Have you created it yourself, or is it a derivative of someone else, or is it a collaborative work? So that's step number one, and that intersects largely with the Copyright Act, which is who owns it and what rights do you have towards it in the current space. How can you show that you have the rights? What are the mechanisms that you have to do that? And of course, I'm talking about it in a general way, but we've delved deeper in the last 25 odd minutes to talk about how does it intersect with the blockchain technology, with NFTs. And then from the buyer point of view is, if you are buying that NFT, what rights do you have, and where contracts come into play when it comes to this, and what is it that you need to bear in mind within the context of the Copyright Act? Not just the legal side of it, but understanding the core of it. Eventually, everything legal is logical. So when you just think of the broader framework, what they've given is just logic. Who owns it? How much do you own it? Do you really think you're the only one who owns it, like in that sense? And then that intersects with the Contracts Act. Do you have it in writing, in very clear terms? What positions do you hold in the ownership, sale, exhibition of that particular work? And also around that, therefore, if a dispute occurs, how do you go about resolving those disputes? What frameworks or jurisdictions can you rely on? Again, intersecting with the marketplaces, I think we'll go towards that very soon, is your relationship, therefore, with the marketplace, the third player, not just the buyer and the seller or the artist, but also the marketplace and the role that they play. And the complications within India, because we don't recognize, crypto yet or NFT yet, but there are guidelines that speak to it, as aside from the 2020 ban. After that,
yeah, that's what I said. So basically, they're now qualified as virtual digital assets under the Income Tax Act. So the government is recognizing.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there is no.
It's
so it's within.
Taxed,
yeah. So
that
was my. Actually, I was coming to the next question. Is you spoke about the IT Act.
Yeah.
And we just to sort of go into taxation. So we've covered these two, and the third one was around. Taxation. So you've had a conversation with the marketplace, you've sold the work, how is it taxed? What are the laws and frameworks that, basically let you keep part of the money or not? And actually connected to that, I have a slightly larger meta question around the issues which come with transactions, value of crypto, money laundering, we've spoken about that, scams, we've spoken about that as well very briefly. So if you can speak to not just taxation as laws, but also some of these larger challenges and what you need to keep in mind so that basically you don't go to jail.
Yeah, so I think just reconfirming that basically taxation is where the Indian government has actually given, sort of credibility to the concept of cryptocurrencies and NFTs. And so since I think 1st April 2022, both cryptocurrencies and NFTs and a bunch of other digital assets are being taxed at a rate of 30%. So on the profits that you make. So for example, if I buy an NFT today and I sell it later for a higher price, the profit that I make from it will be taxed as capital asset, basically capital gains, and 30% is the number on it. Also to, I think, kind of make it easier to track these transactions, there's a 1% TDS that is applicable to be deducted from the person who owes the money. So, and I think another important like nuance to this is that for NFTs that are linked to a digital asset is what this is applicable to. But if an NFT is linked to where the underlying asset is physical, for example, like a painting, then it'll be taxed traditionally, like how, basically how it was being taxed earlier for a painting. So these new laws are only applicable to purely digital versions of an NFT, which are linked to basically a digital asset.
Anuradha, can you speak to the issues around, like this is, I'm glad, thank you for sharing that. And do you see the amount of clarity there is in a law when it comes to government getting money?
Yeah.
Like absolutely, everything else is okay, this is absolutely clear. But just coming to, okay, so there is an asset and that's being sold and there's some money being made. Let's bring in these global issues we spoke about, scams, money laundering, all of this. Like how do you suggest an artist, a creator, company not fall into these larger issues? Like what do you do to be mindful of these scams and everything that's going on?
Okay, so the general understanding when it comes to NFTs has been you take a selfie and you mint an NFT and you make a couple of $1 million, right? But I deal with a lot of clients in the space and I'm constantly stunned and impressed to understand the use cases of NFTs. Now, last year there was a very big Liverpool-Everton game. I'm not a football fan. I do not follow football. My husband does. He loves it. So he wanted to buy tickets to watch this game and he found some fan online. He bought tickets and he was a bit skeptical about the existence of these tickets, the authenticity of them. And basically after the transaction, this person ghosted him. And I told him that, if you'd purchase this ticket as an NFT, if it had been tokenized, this wouldn't be an issue because you'd be able to check the legitimacy of it. You'd be able to check the authenticity. You'd be able to check if this person had the right to sell the ticket to you. So NFTs solve a lot of issues when it comes to these scams, but there are also a lot of scams that are associated with them. One of the keywords in this is rug pulls, right? I don't know how many of you would be familiar with rug pulls, but a rug pull is basically when an NFT project is hyped. Okay, there was actually an NFT project called Iconic, if I'm not mistaken. It was there was a 17-year-old designer on the Solana blockchain, and he promised that there would be 8,000 pieces of some 3D NFTs, 3D images associated with NFTs, and he released 14 of these images on Discord, and that created traction, and it was sold and marketed and all of that, and he sold a bunch of NFTs of this, and I think about 2,000 pieces was sold as NFTs. And at the end, what these guys, the purchasers got in their wallet was a bunch of random emojis. And this person closed all accounts, closed their Discord account, went completely off the grid, and that's exactly what a rug pull is. It's when a scammer invites you, I don't want to use the word invest, but that's the easiest way to describe it, invites you to invest in an NFT project, hypes up the NFT, says this is the best thing ever, and you spend your money on it, and then all online presence of this person just disappears completely. That NFT is basically a bunch of random emojis in this case, right? So there are a lot of rug pulls that happen. What one needs to be aware of when it comes to NFT projects, not just artists, this applies to everyone. Anyone who's purchasing an NFT needs to be aware that you need to do your due diligence on the project, right? Look at the roadmap of the project, ask questions, see who the team is. Does this team have an online presence? See where the project has followers. Does it have more followers on Twitter? Does it have more followers on Discord? Are these followers bots? All right, so these are certain things that you need to look at. These are just practical aspects. As an artist, what you can do to protect yourself in this space, I think this is just a repetition of what we've already spoken about, is secure your intellectual property rights, register your copyrights, trademarks where applicable. That serves as evidence in court. Read the terms and conditions of the marketplace. Please understand them. Please have contracts in place. Educate yourselves. Just do some basic reading. Educate those around you. And yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. You know, there's a wisdom in panel discussions that says when things get repetitive, open up to the audience.
Yeah.
So that's where we are.
Actually wanted
Yeah,
to
sure.
add a bit to it. Sorry, I mean, I guess these are probably like closing remarks or something, but in terms of the diligence, I think where NFT and the crypto markets have sort of, you know, the scale at which the scams have happened, I think even if you did all of your diligence with something like, you know, an FTX, they would fit all of these parameters, you know, where there was massive legibility, you know, validation given to them by people that you trust, you know, people in culture, and you know, celebrities are backing these projects, and you know, so some forms of diligence kind of get met there, but even then they turned out to be, I mean, such scams at such ridiculous levels that I think just you know, regular diligence is not enough anymore. I would like recommend really trying to understand, you know, the logic, the philosophy behind the technology that they're employing. I think you know, this whole trend of making things very accessible is actually kind of working against us now, where, you know, I don't think this is the time to get complacent and lazy about reading the fine print. In fact, I think you have to go one step further and really make sense of, like, for example, one of the banks, not FTX, out of the 3 big scams that happened, one of them was a crypto bank, and in their terms of use, they actually said that if you deposit, you know, basically it was facilitating a banking system on Web3, calling all the banks evil and saying that, you know, here we are there to kind of, you know, replace that existing evil bank system, and if you, whatever, that was their marketing pitch. And if you read the terms of use, it actually said that, you know, the minute you deposit your cryptos with us, we have ownership. And you know, that it's been one of the most astounding scams besides the others. So I would like to add that, you know, I think now is the time to actually really understand, and if something is not making sense, you know, it probably isn't right. Even from a logical perspective, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. Besides all of these regular diligences that we need to do for sure, but yeah, I think we need to get a little deeper with our diligence.
Thank you. So this is open for questions. I'm going to give this to the audience. We'll use one mic.
No, my voice is clear, I guess.
I think it's also for the audio there, the camera. So why don't you use it and pass it around?
So, yeah, hi. Can you hear me clearly? Yeah. So I just wanted to understand, like, in P2P trading, recently...
Do you mind giving your name?
Hi, this is
Question
Gaurav.
directed to someone specific.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get your name.
Yeah,
Hi. So I just wanted to understand, when it comes to P2P trading on Binance, so when we have a USDT and we want to, suppose I'm selling it for 20,000. And recently I came across a tweet where the person was saying that the P2P trading that he did with, that person was marked risky with the government, and somehow his bank account has been frozen because he did P2P trading with this guy through Binance. So in this case, how are we supposed to, like, make decision, like what's the due diligence, and even if we get affected, what's the way out of this?
You mean if somebody has been flagged off as risky?
Yes.
So you, I'm still trying to understand your question. I think all of these things that we've spoken about, also because a lot of these marketplaces are functioning in India, I think some regulatory, spotlight is falling on them. So possibly a reason why they got flagged would be that, you know, maybe there have been instances of financial irregularities, and maybe it's an ED that is kind of, you know, investigating them. There could be multiple reasons, or at a consumer level, they've kind of defaulted. Obviously, if it's been flagged, I'm not even sure, where was this red flagged?
So I read this as a tweet.
Okay.
The person was, like, sharing his own experience.
Okay.
How unsafe Binance is.
Yes.
He said that he did P2P trading on Binance,
Yeah.
and later his account got frozen because he did trading with a risky account, which was
Correct.
marked risky.
Yeah, so I think there could be a number of reasons why something is tagged risky, like I said.
But I, as a trader, won't be knowing on Binance that I'm risky. I'm dealing with a flagged or a risky person on the other end, right? I am like doing the P2B trading as a normal person on that platform.
Correct. So I'm still not understanding where. Basically, are you asking me that where? How will I know if something is irregular in the?
What's the way out? Probably, if I get stuck, my account gets frozen.
Okay.
Then what's the way out?
You're trading with an unsafe account or a person.
Yes, I'm trading with an unsafe.
No way to verify.
Yes,
that
I have no.
person's
Correct.
safety. I mean, there's no credit score, for instance. I don't know to check that.
Correct. I don't know that person has been marked risky by ED or something. I have no.
Correct.
But I have done the transaction.
I think, I mean, in terms of like, legal diligence, these are the mechanisms that have been put in place from a, framework perspective where if the government thinks that, there are some irregularities with a certain entity, it would make it mandatory to flag them off, or I guess that flagging is the, warning sign. And before that, I guess diligence is the only tool that you have. Maybe, like you would do with, transacting in a non-virtual environment, transacting with any company, you could maybe look up the MCA details of a company, for example. Are they registered? Do they have a seemingly valid registered address? Who are their directors? What has been their financial activity? Things like, I mean, that's the kind of diligence you do anyway with transacting at a financial level with, I mean, the kind of diligence you would do with mutual funds and securities and, banks. How do you know that they are legit? I think
like when you get a vendor,
any vendor.
You always ask for their GST certificate,
Yeah.
a PAN card, because that way you can verify that this is an entity that's a tax-paying entity.
But then I'm doing it on a P2P platform through Binance. So Binance doesn't allows me to tell me who is this person.
So I guess it would be a good idea to also read, where the liability would lie, how much responsibility is Binance taking. I haven't, traded on Binance, so I'm not sure if they have a verified status for certain users, or do they have any comment on, or are they shirking complete responsibility? If the platform itself is not taking responsibility for verifying the players, then that itself is a risk that you are voluntarily entering into. You have to know that, If I'm working with like for example, if I trade through, any of the stock exchanges, there is a responsibility on the stock exchange as well, at least in terms of verifications. There are compliances that a company has to do to get on that exchange. But if the platform itself is saying that, you are on your own, that's risky, and so maybe double up on your diligence practices, I guess.
Okay. Do we have another question? Asavri.
So I'm trying to gather all the information I've got today. Asavri, my name is Asavri, and I'm trying to gather all the information I've got today. I have one question, which is basically there are a lot of people who are raising finance for films in this NFT market. And as a producer, I wanted to know that there are also people who have become producers by just, investing. So they, in some way, also become equity partners. So I, as a producer who's in the middle of this, how do I navigate laws, IPs, royalties? I know it's a very big question, but are there any protocols that I need to think of when I have to navigate something like that?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure how this connected to NFTs, but
there's also, like, you can also put a film on the NFT platform.
Correct,
by
yeah,
the end of it. So for example, if that is a hypothetical situation,
got it, yeah.
Then how do I make sure that people have certain copyrights, like the writer,
correct.
me as a producer, if there are other investors who are probably giving me soft money.
Yeah.
So how do I sort of navigate all of this in the NFT world?
I think it would follow a lot of the traditional ways of kind of, getting a film crew together and a production setup together, which is that if you are a co-producer with somebody who's putting in money, again, it has to be your contract that decides, because you're putting in money, exactly what rights are you taking from the project. Are you basically, by law, traditionally, a producer is the person at whose behest the entire film is being made. So if suppose there isn't a contract, what the law says is that all of the rights of all of the people that are working, contributing their work in the film would belong to the producer, barring certain authorship rights. But usually what happens is that between a producer and a distributor and now even studios, all of this is kind of on the table to negotiate, you know, who will have the right to distribute, who will have the right to mint NFTs. It's part of now the negotiating, you know, it's part of the deal now, based on who is willing to, who's taking the maximum risk, who is putting in the maximum resources, and you know, for even a director sometimes, you know, could demand that, you know, if there is an NFT being made of a film, I would want a certain percentage from it. That is part of my compensation for the film. So maybe they'll reduce their advance fee and they would say that, you know, okay, sure, I'll, you know, take a percentage of the NFT revenues that come in. So again, I mean, to put it very simply, it depends on what kind of a deal you're negotiating, and it has to be very explicitly mentioned in your contracts, I think. And there's no like standard way to do this, if that helps, you know. It's up to you to really speak to these people openly and negotiate the fairest thing that makes sense, you know. Whoever's putting in the most resources can ask for bigger percentages.
So, just
also
to clarify, was your question about how do I use NFTs as a part of my contract conversation with everyone, or is it I'm raising money? I'm
raising money on the platform. So essentially, the people who are giving me money end up becoming some sort of investors or equity partners in the film.
Got it.
While I also have other people who are also maybe investors in real life. So how do I sort of?
So your question is, sorry, I'm just going to make sure that it's clearer.
Yeah.
I think I just got it. Yeah.
What you're saying is that how do I ensure that people who are coming in with money that I've raised on this platform,
this is crowdfunding.
Yeah, crowdfunding through NFTs.
Vis-a-vis my other traditional producers with whom
Okay, got it. So basically you are issuing NFTs while crowdfunding.
Correct.
That's what, okay, that's a completely different question than what I answered. So in that case, I think you have to, again, I think, you know, it's flexible, it's really dependent on you, but it's also a lot about what kind of value are you creating. Like any other crowdfunding campaign, you know, with issuing that NFT, what is it that you want to give to the purchaser? Do you want to give them some sort of like, you know, access, for example, access to a certain screening or a premiere, or, you know, engagement with the, and these utility-based NFTs are, I think, the emerging trend in the future, as compared to just aesthetic NFTs that you hold for display. And in terms of, you know, being careful, use a good template for, you know, making the terms and conditions to those people purchasing the NFTs. Be transparent about exactly what they're going to get. And, you know, if you're doing tier-based things, maybe you could, you know, the rights could be tier-based as well. And yeah, I mean, I think it has to be very clearly communicated also that, you know, in terms of rights to a film, the producer or whoever the people making the film are going to retain those rights. You know, maybe for a layman audience that can be spelled out better, that, you know, what you're getting, it's kind of like a ticket and it gives you these things, you know, and beyond that you don't have any rights in the film. Or you cannot associate yourself with the making of the film or call yourself, you know, you cannot be making transactions on our behalf, like you are not associated with us in any other way except a buyer of the NFT.
It sort of still goes back to the larger conversation around, yeah, I was about to give it to you, but just to sort of take it back to the larger conversation around like ownership. And like, you know, to me, it's going down the same logical route of ownership, what rights you're giving away, what licenses, what contracts do you have, and then some of the more real world frameworks and how that helps inform the path to that. So whether it's crowdfunding or whatever it is. I was actually about to say, what do you have? Because you also mentioned about, you know, some of these events and stuff that you're a part of where you get a right to access a network through an event.
Yeah. So what you're looking at is crowdfunding through NFTs, right? You're financing a film through tokens. You need to, of course, be clear on what rights you're parting with. Now, if I am an investor in this film and I purchase, I pay you 5 rupees, maybe that's a little less, but if I pay you 5 crores for one token, what do I get from that token? am I going to get any rights in the film commercially? So I actually used to be a filmmaker before I was a lawyer. My first degree is in filmmaking. Yeah, I know that's a bit of a pivot, but my first degree is in filmmaking. I spent some time in the industry and was very curious about the law, so I went to law school. But commercially speaking, as a filmmaker, I would hate for anyone to have creative control, right? So I would not want that NFT to give any sort of creative control, even if it's even if it's monetary decisions, right? I don't want the person who's holding the NFT to have any sort of decisions on how I distribute my film, where I shoot my film, what sort of crew I hire. So that is something that you need to be very careful of. What rights you're not giving away, because I understand the sentiment of filmmakers. I've been a filmmaker. I've had my content infringed. That's probably the only time I've almost gotten into a physical fight. Didn't follow through with it, but yeah, almost. But yeah, you need to be very careful of the rights that you want to part with. But essentially, like Pankhuri was saying, it is your decision. It's flexible. But from a filmmaker's perspective, I would advise you not to give any creative rights.
Sorry, just adding a very important point that I missed out is also that, you know, by law, if you are making a work at the instance of someone, which means basically a work for hire or commission thing, which could be the relationship in this, maybe because they are giving you the money and it depends on the amount of money that is going into making the project. By law, they would also have, you know, ownership of the copyright in that. So very important to have a written contract that specifically negates that point, you know, that just because this film is being made using your money does not give you any copyright or other rights to it. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Yeah. Your name and if the question is directed.
Yeah, I want to know if there is a painting of the MF.
Sorry, sir, your name and...
My name is Dinesh Rana. So I want to know if there is a painting of MF Hussain, it is widely viewed and widely appreciated, and then a value been given, a market value been given to that artwork. But now if it is in the NFT and there is no underlying physical asset, so how much how much viewership or how would you create a market for that, and how are you going to arrive a real value for that artwork?
Valuation of
valuation of, if it is, there is no physical asset underlying NFT. So if there is a limited viewership of that artwork, so if say there is a, say 1 crore or 50 lakhs, what will be?
So we need to understand, why does MF Hussein's painting has value? Firstly, so one point you mentioned is that because it is viewed by a lot of people, that is why it has value. Now you need to understand that holding MF Hussain painting is an asset class, because anybody who has an MF Hussain painting can sell it for a lot of money. That is why it has value. If you remove that value, it is just a picture of a donkey. I'm sorry, it is just a picture of a donkey, right? Okay, so we need to understand what gives it value. The fact that it is assigned value by pop culture or history or art valuators, you know, they see it as valuable, and then there were collectors who validated it by actually paying that much amount of money for it. That gave it value. Now in terms of NFT also, similar rules apply. I don't think there is a prescribed framework, but this is through the observation that I've had over my time in NFTs. One is, who is the creator? What is their story? You know, how are they sort of marketing themselves, and what is the kind of narrative that they're building for themselves? Second is ownership history. Because again, external validation, what kind of collectors have collected that work? Because it is blockchain, that data is easily available. You can go and see on one click of a button who are the past collectors of a certain NFT creator, right? So if you see credible people having collected that NFTs, the value of those NFTs slowly start going up. Next also is the fact that we all know that NFTs are highly illiquid. So for example, a lot of put money in NFT and they forget about it because they know कि long run में कभी जाके value बढ़ेगा उसका. But the fact is that if your NFT has a liquidity premium, now what I mean by liquidity premium is how easily can you sell that asset? How easy it is for you to get rid of that NFT and accrue value back in your pocket. That is called liquidity premium. So certain creators who are now being collected by a lot of interesting collectors have a higher liquidity premium. So for example, because now everybody knows my name, it will be easier for them to sell my NFT at a certain X value. That is why my prices have gone up. Just an example of, you know, certain conditions or parameters that gives valuation framework. So when I started out, my first NFT did not sell for, you know, 3 ETH, 4 ETH. I sold it for like $18 because I was new in the market. So I worked my way up. I made my presence felt. Everybody loved my work. Slowly, slowly, you know, collectors started coming in. There was scarcity and demand created by my presence and the sale that was actually happening. So that sort of, you know, cemented my work as a valuable piece of art, and that's how the prices have now gone up. I hope that.
Yeah, I do. Hi, I'm Jagan. Anyone in the panel can take this question. I'm curious about AI-generated art, and given the fact that AI art is itself a kind of sampling of existing art in the internet. Yeah. Are there any ownership or copyright implications for, you know, let's say I make AI generated art and I want to kind of mint an NFT and sell it. What are the implications as far as ownership and are? Yeah.
Anuradha, do you want to take that first since you are an AI panelist?
Sure. So with AI generated art, there are a lot of complications. Okay, now AI basically is a technology that learns patterns, right? It scours the internet and it looks for thousands of images to create maybe one image, or it looks for thousands of answers to answer one question. Do not rely only on ChatGPT for your answers, guys. But yeah, so with AI generated art, you have to be very careful of how you're going about it. You may not, the thing with AI is that it does not have personhood, okay, in most jurisdictions. In India, AI does not have personhood. The very concept of ownership comes from the concept of personhood. To own art or to own copyright, I need to be a person, but with the lack of status of personhood, especially in India, AI cannot hold copyright, right? So if you are using AI, if you're creating AI assisted art, is that art more yours? Does it have too many elements of someone else's work? I think there was a project in India. I'm not sure, I don't recollect completely, but I think there was a lawyer who had, it was like diffusion, if I'm not mistaken, but sorry, do you remember the name of the project? But it was a project which basically used this person's artistic style. So AI learned this person's patterns, and it also learned Vincent van Gogh's pattern. And the output was, and it got registration in India. Raghav AI, yes. It also got registration in India. Now that registration has been struck off. But when you look at one of the paintings, it looks completely like a Vincent van Gogh work. So there's no way you're going to get copyright over that sort of art, right? So yeah, you need to be very careful with AI generated art. AI will not have copyright. And if you use AI to generate art, you also may not get copyright protection over it.
I just wanted to add to this. Sorry. With AI generated art, I think this is one example. A similar incident also happened in the US, where they accidentally gave copyright to a comic book, which then they later realized was almost entirely generated by AI, and later they withdrawn that registration, but they did give registration to the human aspects of it. So the emerging trend when it comes to AI generated art is that firstly, AI cannot have copyright, not just because it's not a person, but also because as a concept, copyright can only be given to humans. It's been defined for humans. So even the monkey selfie, for example, you know, the courts decided that the monkey cannot have copyright in the selfie that it took. That's one aspect of it. But also, for example, the US Copyright Office has released some, guidelines about where they've specified that in an AI-generated work, it has to be coupled with human input, human creative choices. There has to be originality, and it should be very visible. Basically, it can just AI-generated art per se, which means that you give a bunch of prompts and something is generated in itself will not possibly have protection. But if you combine it, maybe you modify it to a certain extent, maybe you alter it and make a new kind of work out of it, that resulting work could get copyright protection. So for our clients also, we're kind of working with people who are using AI tools and trying to make sure that wherever, this hasn't been decided in India yet, but I think this is going to be the trend, that we make sure that there's no doubt as to how much human input is there, even when you're using AI generated tools. It has to work as a tool in your work. It cannot be the creator. Where the machine is doing the brunt of the creative work, that will probably not get copyright protection.
I think that has significant implications for the advertising and design industry.
Yeah.
Because a lot of designers are now using AI to reduce their work, and then I know of a designer who basically focuses on book covers, and this was one of the issues with the publishing house, where they were like, if this is if this is AI generated, to what extent? And then on the basis of that, they approved that cover. Because it was going to global markets for that particular author. So especially for advertising and design, there are significant implications on how you can create or use AI in your your full-time job. You want to add something?
Can I just
Sure.
I'm just trying to understand how gray is the zone from, in terms of how much individual artist input kind of makes it legally sound.
Are you asking 1 chammach or 30%?
Yeah. That's precisely
That's
what I'm
question,
asking. And also, I'm also working on a comic book on the side. So within a comic book perspective, if I use AI to generate the art, but it's my thought and speech bubbles. So where does that stand?
You will get protection over the speech and thought bubbles, not the art, unless you have added to the art itself.
So
how much is really, it's very dependent on a case-to-case basis, and there are judges who are probably going to decide that. But as lawyers, I think when clients come to us with these kind of queries, we are trying to, really push the, extent of which human authorship can be there, so that, like I said, there shouldn't be any confusion ki kitna AI ne kiya. It should be very evident that yes, there is human contribution here, and it's an original creative expression, whether or not it was AI generated tool that was used or Photoshop that was used. It should be very clear, and I think that is subjective. And even you can look up some precedents which were non-AI related, but for example, Richard Prince, who took some photographs and added very minimal sort of contribution to it, but the courts did think that it transformed a work enough to make it a new work, where he could use existing copyrighted work and really transformed it with just adding little bit of detail. Whereas some people felt that, that's literally using someone else's work, you're doing minimal work, contribution, but how can you get copyright? So I think, it's nuanced.
I think this is a very important one, because it impacts, how much, basically your rights in terms of if you are not creating the full work yourself. I think perspectives from you both on this exact thing will be important, because it sort of brings in a certain amount of subjectivity as well. What do you think? What percentage?
So honestly, they say ये तो मैं भी बना सकता था. Now with AI, anybody can. It's about what prompts and inputs you feed into it. I'm personally training AI to make works in my style because I want my style to be learned by AI. So even 100 years after my death, people will be able to see a Cyber Shakti style going, because we need to realize that art, in the sense, why does it have value? Because people want to replicate it, people want to apply it, right? So I want to leave a legacy behind wherein, you know, anybody has access to my style, anybody has access to, you know, what I create. So now, in fact, the NFTs that I've been creating, I've started making them as CCO, that is available to everybody without permission, because that is a marketing stance that I've been taking. Be free. So actually what happened is, when I started out, I was very new, and veteran sculptors started taking all my ideas and turning them into sculptures, and there was literally no law to protect me. I went to a few lawyers. They said copyright will not work in this case because it's not a direct reproduction. They've taken your idea and they've made sculptures out of it. Okay. And I had no way to prove that this was my work and my ownership, right? So, and very recently, through my journey with NFTs, I've realized the highest selling, like I'm talking about shameless amount of money, has been made by artists who have given away CCO rights. Because what happens is, people are recreating their works, people are using free licenses to sort of, create brands out of their works just by tweaking them a little, right? So what it's doing is, it's sort of free marketing for the artists. Now the only thing to remember here is that these artists had a very distinct, recognizable style. So now, in spite of anybody having license to do anything with their work, people still know, this is X copy's work.
So this is slightly different approach to what you were talking about. This is about, rather than say, okay, I need to put 50%, what if I put it out for free, but it recognizes my style, and that becomes the differentiator. I'm just seeing it from a slightly different approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, with the numbers and figures and percentages, to answer your question, it's very grey. I can't put a number to it. But to add to what Shakti is saying, the CCO, which is a Creative Commons license, has become very common now. And in the AI world, I think it was Drake's voice that was used by, that there was some AI. I'm not sure about the terminology, but basically it was created using AI or recreated. Now, I am a very, 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 very big Eminem fan. Okay. And if Eminem was to give a license for AI to regenerate his voice and sort of allow people to make music in the style of Eminem, I, as his fan, would still respect that, and I would still love it. And I think that, maybe he should get some royalty from any songs that are sold using this AI generated Eminem voice. So maybe that's another way to go about it. If you are, having an open license for someone to use your work, anything that they create based on that, anything that they build on that, any derivatives that they create, you should get a percentage of the sales from that. So I know that doesn't answer your question. There is no real answer to that at the moment.
So there is somebody doing it. Not for Eminem, but there is a Canadian singer called Grimes, and it's very popular nowadays because she's charging 50% royalty. You make any music you want using her voice, but 50% royalties go to her. And people all over the Web3 social circuit are dropping rap songs in her voice. They're doing random shit with that voice. Anybody's becoming a pop star, and Grimes is just making 50% royalty by not even producing anything. She just trained an AI model for like 15 minutes max, because that's how much time it takes to train a AI model in your voice.
Just wanted to give him one more input, which is that, when you use apps like Midjourney, for example, or Stability Diffusion, in their terms of use, they also say that, we don't guarantee that the work that comes out of the tool will be infringement free. They themselves are not taking that risk. And they also say that, the output may be repeated, like two users might have the same output. They don't guarantee that it's going to be unique every time. Thirdly, they also, I think it's Bing or one of these tools, also say it may include advertising, one of these text apps. Yeah. So I think it's best to, take them as tools, treat them as tools.
Sorry, I didn't get you. May include advertising?
Bing, which is another chat GPT of sorts, says that, our output may actually include advertising.
So images. advertising
No, no,
images?
no, no,
you
no.
mean?
Like as part of the text in output. I mean, that's there's no other way to.
Oh, okay.
Like if I ask them a question, the text may be biased towards some form of advertising, basically.
Ah,
Mm,
okay.
no, no, as in the output, yeah, not like there will be a separate display of ad. Within the output, they may, yeah, they may be using it for advertising as well. And this is really like, gray. They need to really clarify what they mean by this in their terms of use, but just keep these things in mind when using it.
I'm not sure if we have time for another question. Is there a burning one? Otherwise, we can close the
I
session.
have one burning one.
No, but since you've already asked a question, I just
Cool.
want to give, if there's
has a
anybody
question.
else who has a question, no? Okay. Then one burning one,
So
but
I
a
can
quick
burn?
one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about how like if there's an art project that needs 50 collaborators, like a film, for example, how can one change the ownership model in filmmaking, for example, where it's very centralized, where there's one producer, often they don't pay people down the line. How can NFTs be used to sort of make co-collaborators on that, like a cooperative society model, and does that work? I'm not sure if there's a quick answer to this question. I'm sorry.
Simplest is that a lot of market platforms have the facility to split revenues generated, and it is hard coded in the smart contract itself, percentage wise distribution. Like a lot of people used to scam people saying that with these NFTs that we are making, 50% will go to a dog shelter, 50% will go to an old age center, but the money never really went. Right. So now you have the facility of actually, when you're sort of minting an NFT, minting means creating or uploading an NFT. You have drag down menus. You can simply click. If you can, see a part of the menu where it says split with people, you just need the Ethereum wallet address or whatever chain they are on, and it's hard coded. So as soon as the sale is done, the revenue is splitted automatically.
So the 50 people need to have a wallet.
Yeah. The other way can obviously be like have manual processes in place that post, like that is however you want to distribute it. But for films, I think check out newhere.xyz. This is like the biggest collaborative documentary film ever being made on crypto artists. So maybe you can check out how they're sort of compensating.
Can you repeat that?
Newhere.xyz.
Newhere.xyz.
HERE. Yeah.
And any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, well, NFTs, of course, open up a completely international market for artists, right? And we've spoken about the complications, we've spoken about the risks, but just try to go out there and have fun. Use this to your advantage, and the opportunities are explosive. So I think there's a whole new world waiting out there.
So, like she said, opportunities. Opportunities is a keyword here. Now, 2020, when the lockdown struck, I was a corporate employee and my art was a hobby art. Last month, I sold at Sotheby's. I auctioned at Sotheby's, where MF Hussain from India was auctioned. So, that is the level of opportunities that open up for you. If you take the, if you take the effort to learn the technology, to really understand the power behind it, this is how accelerated your journey can become. So people are always there to sort of guide you now, because the kind of initiatives that are being taken, like this for example, were not present when I started out with NFTs. We were 5 people from India doing it. We learned it. We got scammed along the way. So, make the most of these kind of conversations and, just write your own story. There is literally no limit to what you can achieve with NFTs.
Yeah, I think that's a very positive note to kind of end on. I think, yeah, I also would, really stress on the conversation bit of it at my law firm. This becomes a very important aspect of helping infrastructures become better. Like when we are in the audiences with you guys, it helps us also, take back from how to make our processes better, maybe, obviously at a policy level, but also in our practices as lawyers. So I think especially with the incoming technologies growing more and more, law does kind of, always remain a few steps back. So I'm happy that these conversations are happening. It kind of helps the infrastructure overall. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think, and just to sort of circle back to what we've done, I've always find reflecting a good way to remember is we started off talking about what NFTs are and breaking down these terminologies, but from the perspective of the examples that they gave from their own real life experiences. We then looked at the entire legal framework and ecosystem, a little bit globally, but also in India, especially the laws that you're familiar with, the Contracts Act, the Copyright Act, the IT Act, etc., and some of the others in between, and how it intersects with you. But from what I took away from it is that, hey, there's already a base layer of that law that exists. Mirror it in thinking about how your work on the NFT, in the NFT universe, intersects with that. And the second thing that I took away from what you all shared around all of those cases and everything was also that it's such a new space that you become the use case. I think you said that I love looking through new use cases because it gives me so much more. And I find that's what you were trying to say as well, right? The law is catching up. So you will become the use case. And the more you play with it, the more opportunities you explore, you are likely to fail, and failure is the only way to grow. But the legal, if you're scared of the law that you may do something wrong, I hope this session would have given you some sense of how you can engage with it without feeling overwhelmed by it. And what I took away about that is, who is the creator, who is the buyer, and what's the marketplace. I think having these three sort of parties there and breaking that, anything down, keeping that in mind would I think make the journey around the legal frameworks and access easy for you. And then finally, I think what everybody shared